Hello and welcome to another bikepacking Q&A video. In this video, we've got a fantastic question in from Doug.
Hey Tom, this is Doug. Thanks so much for your inspiring videos. I'd like to know what kind of checks you do on your bike, both pre and post ride. Like, do you check for punctures? Do you wash your bike and get the mud off? Do you grease your chain, etc.? Thanks so much.
Now I feel that this topic is going to be a slight point of contention. People are going to get in touch and say, you should check this, but you didn't mention it. There's so many things that you can check. It all depends entirely on how many miles you're riding, how often you keep your bike serviced, what sort of terrain you're riding on, how heavily loaded you are. All of those things will impact the wear and tear on your bike. But these are three things that I always check regardless of how many miles I'm doing before each and every bikepacking trip. The things I focus on are the elements of the bike that tend to wear out and go wrong most frequently. If you've been riding a while, you'll probably be able to guess. The first thing I look for is the chain. What's the wear like? And if it's starting to need replacing, I make sure that I've got a spare one or I get it replaced before I go on my adventure. This is probably another reason why you should keep a good mental tally of how many miles roughly you've done on each and every bike. That way you know there or thereabouts when your chain's going to need replacing anyway. You're not going to have that annoying issue of it snapping when you're out in the middle of nowhere. And it also helps maintain the cassette and the chainring, stops it wearing out as quickly. I always check the state of the chain before any bikepacking trip. I start with the stretch in the chain using this chain tool, and you can see there's a lot of miles still to go before I need to replace that. The other thing I do is make sure that it's clean and I lubricate it before every trip. The last thing I want is having a dry chain in the middle of nowhere. It starts to squeak and become really annoying, and it just feels really hard to push the pedals. Now I know the state of the bike isn't great at the moment. I've been doing a lot of muddy riding around here, but this will be going on a bikepacking trip fairly soon, so I'll make sure that everything is super clean and super lubricated and ready to go. The next thing I check, and it's probably the most important thing for most people, is the state of the tyres. I go through, check the quality of the tyre, make sure that it's not got any big holes or any cuts or scrapes or anything stuck in there that's going to cause me problems later down the line. These have just been replaced, so I'm pretty confident that these are fine for my next bikepacking trip, but it's something I always check. The next thing I check is the tyre pressure. This is really important. If your tyres are losing pressure ever so slightly in between each ride, if you're doing a long multi-day ride, you'll probably start to notice towards the end of the trip that the tyres have started to go a little bit flat. That obviously slows you down, but it's more likely to cause punctures later down the line. So that's another thing I check. Pump it up to a good pressure and then check it periodically a couple of days before the bikepacking trip. While we're on with the tyre, I do tend to check the wheel as well, not as often. I just give the spokes a squeeze and see what sort of tension they've got in there. These are really tight. I also check the brake pads as well. Because I ride this bike quite a lot, I do have a pretty good idea of the state of the wheels and the brake pads because the brakes are working fine. I don't have any wobble in the wheel. So it's not something I check as often as I do the tyres. But make sure you check the tyres, and while you're there, have a look at your wheel and make sure everything's fine. And the last thing that I always check is the tightness of bolts and fixings for my bikepacking gear. This is really important to me because I carry quite a lot of stuff, quite a lot of camera equipment. It goes all over the world. The bike tends to be dismantled more frequently than my other bikes because it's going in a box on a plane quite a lot. I make sure that nothing's going to work its way loose. So I check things like the pannier bolts down here, anything that's holding a bikepacking bag onto the frame. I make sure everything is tight, and things like the handlebars and seat posts as well are always things that can work their way loose. So if you make sure that they're tight, nothing's going to go wrong. That also applies to the wheels. I make sure that the through axles are really tight. The wheels do tend to come on and off quite a bit. If that's you, make sure you check those before each and every ride. Thanks very much to Doug for a great question. I really appreciate leaving a voicemail. If you would like to get your question answered in an upcoming Q&A video, you want to hear your voice on one of these videos, make sure you head over to my website, click the record button, and you can leave a voicemail for me there. Don't worry if you get it wrong, you can cancel and do it again. I won't hear all of your mistakes. You can also send a question to me on Instagram Messenger or leave a comment in this video or any Q&A video, and I'll be sure to get back to you at some point. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.